Mornings in Charleston had a particular softness to them, sunlight filtering through Spanish moss, the scent of damp earth rising with the heat. I was sitting on my porch, mug in hand, steam curling upward like a whispered memory. The wooden planks creaked under my rocking chair, the familiar rhythm of peace. It had taken me years to earn this silence. Every sip of coffee tasted like freedom. Freedom from chaos, from debt, from expectations I never asked for. There was no hum of traffic, just birdsong, distant wind chimes, and the occasional bark from a neighbor's golden retriever. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been clinging to this sense of calm until my phone buzzed. Doorbell notification. I set the mug down gently, crossed the porch, and opened the door. A plain white envelope sat on my welcome mat. No return address. The handwriting made something twist inside me. I hadn't seen Delphine's loops and slants in over a year, but my body remembered. Muscle memory knows the difference between comfort and warning. I picked it up slowly, my fingers already tensing like they expected pain. Inside was a photo, one I'd never seen before but recognized instantly. Our mother lay in a hospital bed, tubes snaking from her arms, head turned away from the camera. The lighting was sterile, her skin pale. On the back, in that familiar cursive, "If she dies, just know it's because you refuse to care." For a second, my breath caught. But then I saw the timestamp. 3 years old. She'd used an old photo. The manipulation wasn't subtle. It was weaponized. I stood there on my porch, fingers trembling slightly, but my face held firm. I wasn't who I used to be. Not anymore. My phone rang. Of course it did. "Octavia?" Her voice dripped sugar, artificially sweet and sharp around the edges. "You got it, right? I didn't know what else to do. I was just so scared." "You sent me an old picture and a guilt trip." "What exactly are you trying to do, Delphine?" She sniffled. "It's Mom. Things are getting bad. And the house is in trouble, too. The bank's calling, and She trailed off, fishing for sympathy like always. "I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious." "How much?" I asked, already knowing the answer would be insulting. 700. I let that hang in the air. 700 what? 1,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but if I could just borrow against your house just until... You want me to mortgage my home to cover your gambling debt? The pause on the line was deafening. It wasn't all gambling. Some of it was investments, crypto. I got caught in a few bad decisions, but I'm fixing it. I cut her off. "This isn't a fix. This is a fire, and you want me to carry the gas can." "Octavia, please. You don't know what it's like. I'm scared." "You should be." I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, more from a kind of cellular exhaustion. How many times had she done this? Different crisis, same playbook? Delphine cried, the family looked at me, and somehow I was the one expected to clean up. I sat back down on the porch, the mug of coffee now cold. I didn't pick it back up. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling, searching for her name, court records, news mentions. There it was. Small claims filed against her, a revoked teaching license, mentions in forums about shady crypto dealings. One Reddit thread titled, "Avoid this woman, she'll wreck your credit and your life." I created a folder on my desktop, Delphine Evidence. It was time to stop defending myself with silence. I wasn't planning revenge, I was building protection. The wind picked up slightly, brushing past the edges of the porch. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime clanged twice. Later that afternoon, I walked across the street to Renee's. She was already on her porch, glass of sweet tea in hand, sunglasses perched in her hair. "You look like someone found a ghost in their mailbox," she said without looking up. It was Delphine. Renee rolled her eyes and pointed to the spare chair. "Sit. Talk. Don't hold it in." I sat. Told her about the envelope, the call, the number. Renee didn't interrupt, just listened the way good friends do. When I finished, she said, "You worked like hell for that house. Don't you dare hand it over to ghosts from your past." "She's not done," I said. "She's just getting started." "She's desperate, and desperate people don't play fair. She'll go public if you don't cave. Posts, lies, whatever it takes to make you look like the villain. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. Then I'll be the villain who kept her house. Renee smiled. Atta girl. The sun dipped lower, painting the houses in gold. I felt something shift, not relief, not anger, just clarity. I was standing in the eye of a storm that had been forming for decades. That night, I poured myself a glass of red wine, trying to untangle my thoughts. I sat by the window, scrolling through emails, double-checking my security cameras. Everything seemed quiet. Then my phone buzzed. Front door camera, motion detected. I tapped the screen. There she was, Delphine, standing on my porch, smiling. I stood motionless as Delphine smiled at the camera above my door, like she was greeting an old friend instead of crashing through my carefully built peace. I didn't open the door right away. I needed a second, just one, to remind myself that this wasn't unexpected. People like her don't knock because they're polite. They knock because they know you'll eventually answer. I opened the door slowly, cautious but collected. She wore a soft pink cardigan, the kind that screamed harmless, and jeans without a wrinkle in sight. Her hair was curled just enough, makeup light but intentional. It was her version of camouflage. "Hey," she said, voice syrupy. "Can we talk?" My instinct told me to shut the door. My spine told me to stand still. "You came all the way here," I said. "So talk." Delphine chuckled like we were about to rehash old family gossip. "Can I come in?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She floated in like she still belonged here, commenting on everything from the wood floors to the color of my throw pillows. "You always had a good eye for details," she said, touching the edge of a photo frame. I didn't sit, neither did she. "You want coffee?" I asked out of formality, not hospitality. No, I won't stay long," she replied, which meant she would. Delphine circled my living room like she was prepping it for an open house. "It's beautiful, really. You've done well for yourself." I waited. She took a breath. "I was thinking, maybe you, me, and Dad could get dinner tomorrow. Nothing formal, just catching up." I raised an eyebrow. "Catching up over a menu we can't afford unless someone's credit card is about to get smoked?" She laughed a little too loudly. "Don't be like that. He wants to see you. We both do." "Sure," I said. "Let's have dinner." The steakhouse they picked was as Charleston as it gets. Dark wood, white tablecloths, a menu with no prices. Dad was already seated when I walked in, wearing his old navy blazer that had seen more church pews than job interviews. Delphine sat beside him, grinning like she'd found a shortcut back into the family photo. We ordered. Small talk bounced around. Dad asked how work was going. Delphine complimented my necklace. I watched the pauses between questions, the glances between them. They weren't waiting for dessert, they were waiting for an opening. Delphine leaned forward. "We're just trying to bring the family back together." I said nothing. She smiled through her teeth. "You've always been the one we could count on." And there it was. Maxton cleared his throat. "Your mother worries about you, you know, being alone all the time." I set my fork down. "What are you asking?" Delphine glanced at Dad, then back to me. "We think maybe you could refinance the house, just temporarily. It'd help stabilize everything. Give us time to figure things out." I looked at both of them. And my voice didn't waver. "You want me to sacrifice my financial security so you two can patch up a disaster I didn't create?" Delphine's eyes welled up instantly, like she had tears on standby. "You always had the stable life. All I'm asking is one gesture." "One gesture," I repeated. "Like selling my spine to pay off someone else's mess?" Dad finally spoke. "Sometimes we carry weight for others. That's what families do." I stared at him. Family carries each other, not just dumps it all on the one who learned to stand. We finished our meal in silence. When I got home, I kicked off my heels and walked barefoot across the cool hardwood. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I knew something had shifted. The next morning, my phone buzzed, a text from a former coworker. "Hey, just wanted to say I think it's great you're helping Delphine. Real family stuff." I blinked. What? I opened Facebook. Posts danced across my feed, cryptic but pointed. Some people talk family. Others show it. Or, true love is letting go of money. One included a blurry photo of the steakhouse with the caption, "Rebuilding what matters most." They had started the story without me. I was already the villain in their redemption arc. I didn't respond. I took screenshots, every line, every comment, every pixel of manipulation. I opened a folder. Narrative flip, documentation. Later that day, I walked back over to Renee's. She handed me coffee before I even spoke. "They've started," I said. She nodded. "I saw. But you? You stay quiet. Let them run wild. You'll still be standing when the dust settles." I exhaled. It's not the lies that sting. It's the choreography. They rehearsed this together. Renee placed a hand on my arm. "Let them write their fairy tale. You don't need their fiction." I thought back to high school. Delphine had lied to a teacher about cheating on a test. I stood up for her, got suspended in the process. That wasn't the first time I paid her bill, but it was the first time I noticed she never tried to stop me. That evening, I sat on the couch, scrolling through emails, checking security footage. Everything felt like a countdown. Then I saw it. A folded note slipped through my mail slot. It wasn't mailed. No envelope. Just paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. "If you won't help her, at least don't block the only chance she has." Below the message, Delphine's current address. No signature. Just quiet pressure. I held the note for a moment, then folded it again, tighter this time, until the paper creaked between my fingers. This wasn't about help. It was about surrender. The sun hadn't even fully risen when I opened my laptop, scrolling through the damage. My name was still floating in the digital winds, tagged in vague statuses, pulled into threads, suggested as the selfish sister who'd let family fall apart. Delphine's silence was louder than any post. She didn't need to say anything when she had an army of sympathizers painting her as the wounded dove and me as the stone-hearted sibling. I wasn't about to respond publicly. I knew better. But I did start something new. A timeline. A cold, clinical breakdown of every incident since her reappearance. I saved links, screenshots, IP traces. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was preparing for something else. Then came the email from my financial app. New credit inquiry alert. That made me sit up straighter. I hadn't applied for anything. Not a credit card, not a line of credit, not even a store account. My stomach turned slowly. I navigated to my credit report and pulled the most recent file. There it was. An application for a $50,000 personal loan under my name, using an address I hadn't lived at since I was 22. The kind of information only someone who'd grown up with you would know. I sat frozen for a second. Then I clicked through the metadata, cross-referencing activity with my system's alert logs. A match popped up. Delphine's IP address. Her name wasn't on the application, of course, but the digital fingerprints were there, clear as day. She hadn't just tried to guilt me into giving her money, she'd tried to steal it in my name. I stared at the screen and muttered, "She didn't just want my help, she wanted my place." It wasn't just a violation of privacy, it was an attempted override of my identity. I contacted the lender immediately, began the dispute process, submitted a fraud report, and locked my credit across all 3 bureaus. But the emotional sting lingered far longer than any bureaucratic step. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, haunted by echoes I thought I'd long since buried. At some point near dawn, I found myself digging through an old file box tucked in the back of my hallway closet, dusty, unlabeled. Inside, between faded report cards and birthday cards from people long gone, I found it. A folded sheet of notebook paper, my mother's handwriting. "To Delphine," it began. "You're our star, but your sister will always be there to catch your fall." I didn't even feel the weight of the paper. I just felt the weight of the years that had passed since it was written. Back then, I'd thought that line meant I was dependable, that being the fallback was a compliment. Now, I saw it for what it truly was, a casting call, the role of the responsible one, the one expected to bend without breaking. I whispered to the paper, I wasn't the backup plan. I was the sacrifice no one admitted to making. The next morning, I walked along the waterfront. Charleston's breeze carried salt and silence, giving me a moment to breathe. I passed runners, dog walkers, tourists snapping photos of pastel row houses. The city felt oblivious to the quiet storm inside me. My mind wasn't racing, it was sorting, listing. I mentally pulled up every instance of Delphine crossing boundaries, the fake loan, the social lies, the manipulative notes. Even as kids, she'd been the kind who stole your Halloween candy, then cried until you apologized for accusing her. When I got home, I pulled out a small wooden box tucked away in my linen closet. Inside were years of letters from Delphine, some from college, others from therapy stints, a few written in faux gratitude after I'd sent her money for rent, bail, or emergency dental work. One by one, I fed them into the fireplace. Some burned fast. Others curled slowly, edges turning black before they folded in on themselves. I watched the ashes settle, then vacuumed them up without a second glance. Later that day, I set a calendar reminder. Call attorney. I was done making boundaries with words. I needed them on paper, legally binding. As I stood at my kitchen sink, rinsing a glass, a man walking his dog outside paused at my gate. He glanced toward my house. "You all right, miss?" he asked. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped to the door. "More than all right," I said. "I'm finally drawing lines." 2 days later, I met with a local attorney I'd worked with years ago on a property issue. We sat at a corner table in a quiet coffee shop near the library. I laid everything out, the loan fraud, the social pressure, the emotional manipulation. He listened without flinching. "I've seen this before," he said. "It's financial abuse. Not always visible, but very real." He laid out a path: fraud report, protective filing, credit freeze maintenance, documentation trail. Then he asked gently, "Have you considered a restraining order?" I hesitated, not out of fear, but finality. He added, "You'd be surprised how often emotional coercion escalates once money fails." I nodded slowly. "If protecting myself breaks the family," I said, "then maybe it was already broken." That night, just after midnight, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: "I know what she's doing." I clicked. The body contained a forwarded email chain between Delphine and someone named R. I didn't know who that was, but the message was clear. "She's tougher than I remember," Delphine wrote. "But I'll break her. She always folds eventually." I stared at the screen, letting the words settle like dust in a room you haven't entered in years. She still thought I was the same girl who'd hand over her lunch money, who'd cover for her lies, who'd give up her life to protect someone who never once protected me. I leaned back, closed the laptop softly, and said out loud to no one in particular, "Not this time." I must have read that email a dozen times. Each time it hit deeper. "She's tough, but I'll break her. She always folds eventually." Those words weren't just written, they were aimed, like a slow-motion bullet designed to dismantle every inch of progress I'd built for myself. I stared at the screen, the message floating there like a challenge, a dare wrapped in familiarity. The next morning, I dialed a new attorney, not the one I used to finalize my home purchase or update my will, the one I found after combing through reviews of professionals who specialized in family financial manipulation. We scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. I wanted someone who'd heard every version of "she didn't mean it" and "family's complicated," and still knew when to raise legal hell. By the time I stepped into his downtown office, my bag was packed like a war chest: documents, messages, screen captures, timestamps, and voice memos. My voice didn't tremble as I laid it all out. I wasn't asking for sympathy, I was requesting action. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, then leaned back in his chair. "This isn't uncommon. What's rare is someone showing up this prepared." He recommended filing a preemptive affidavit, outlining prior coercion attempts and establishing a documented pattern of behavior. "If she ever tries to escalate things legally, this puts you ahead." I signed it without hesitation. By sunset, I had changed every password I could think of: bank accounts, utilities, even my pet insurance. I contacted my financial advisor to restrict access to any property decisions, and I updated my will, for the third time in 6 months. This time, no blood relatives would see a scent. I didn't feel paranoid. I felt efficient. If they wanted a war, I'd fight it with paperwork, not pity. Later that evening, I was putting groceries away when another email came through. Same anonymous sender. This one was shorter, sharper. She's talking to someone in your HOA. Watch your mailbox. My chest tightened, not from fear, but the familiar disgust that came with realizing just how far she'd go. I grabbed my phone and called Renee. Tell me something, I said. Anyone from the HOA come sniffing around lately? Renee paused. Funny you ask. Some guy showed up 2 days ago, asking about noise complaints. Said he was following up on reports. I felt it then, that slow drop in the gut when everything connects. She's trying to smear me from inside my own neighborhood, I muttered. People like her don't need an audience. They build one. I thanked Renee, hung up, and leaned against the counter. My neighborhood had been my sanctuary. Now it felt infiltrated. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was protecting the life I'd built. You can't break someone in daylight, I whispered, so you slither through shadows. Got it. That night, as I lay in bed, a memory surfaced, sharp and unsolicited. Years ago, maybe 10 or 12, Delphine had used my name to return a pile of clothes she'd stolen. When I found out, she laughed. It's not a big deal, she said. You weren't using your ID anyway. I laughed then, too. She's scrappy, I told myself, just trying to get by. But now, I saw it for what it was. A test, a rehearsal, an early sign that she believed rules were things other people followed. And I was someone she could step on to skip a few. When you normalize small betrayals, I whispered to the ceiling, you become a participant in your own erosion. I got up, pulled out a box from the back of my closet, old cards, scribbled notes, post-its in Delphine's handwriting that once said things like, thanks for the rent help, and couldn't have done this without you. One by one, I dropped them in the fireplace. No ceremony, no music, just the soft sound of paper catching flame and folding in on itself. The next morning, I scheduled a face-to-face with Sheila, our HOA president, a tough, gray-haired woman who wore pressed khakis like armor and drank her coffee black. I just want to be ahead of anything she might stir up, I said calmly. She's family, technically, but she's complicated. Sheila raised an eyebrow. Aren't they all? I offered a smile. Let's just say if you hear anything wild in the next few weeks, you might want context. She nodded. People love drama. You'd be surprised what makes it into our suggestion box. I'm trying to stay ahead of the curtain opening, I replied. She took notes, gave a small nod, then added, if anything lands in writing or ends up as gossip, keep it. Document everything. I walked out of her office and straight to my local tech store, bought 2 security cameras, and had one installed at the front porch and another angled at my mailbox. They'd see me now, yes, but I'd see them first. Later that evening, with a glass of wine in hand, I sat down and wrote a letter to Delphine. Not to mail, not to post, just to release. I didn't curse. I didn't accuse. I simply said what had never been said. You treated me like a spare tire in the family's emotional flat. You only pulled me out when everything else blew. Then I paused, took a deep breath, and added, you don't owe someone shelter when all they do is tear holes in your roof. When I finished, I folded the letter in half, walked over to the fireplace, and dropped it into the last of last night's ash. The flame rose quickly, then died even faster. Some things don't need to be said out loud to be finished. It wasn't anger that filled me, not sadness either. It was something firmer, deeper, resolve. This wasn't the beginning of a war. This was the drawing of a line, not with chalk, but stone. 2 days later, I pulled into my driveway with grocery bags in hand. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows across my walkway. Something on the porch caught my eye. A box. No label. No name. I set the bags down carefully and picked it up, bringing it inside before opening it slowly. Inside was a single photo frame. Cracked down the center. The picture inside. Me and Delphine, maybe 10 years younger. Our arms around each other at a family barbecue. The glass split our faces cleanly down the middle. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't guilt. It was a warning. I woke to 6 messages and 2 missed calls. The texts were all variations of the same theme. Is this true? Just saw it on TikTok. You okay? I sat up, heart racing, and opened the first link someone sent me. The video started with my face mid-sentence, jaw set, voice raised. Except I hadn't raised my voice like that. Not at dinner, not ever in public. The clip had been edited to make it seem like I was screaming at Delphine. My voice, distorted slightly, sounded harsher, even cruel. The context had been stripped entirely. It looked like a woman melting down at a family dinner while her poor sister sat in wide-eyed horror. Comments poured in under the video. She's the cold one. Typical rich sister, no soul. Imagine being that heartless and still thinking you're the victim. I watched it again. Slower this time. Noticing the same few frames reused, subtle loops in the footage, audio spliced together from different sentences. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. I didn't panic. I downloaded the clip, sent it straight to my attorney with a subject line that read, "Manipulated media, document and archive." Then I exhaled. Not out of peace, but protocol. I called Renee. Her voice came through fast and firm. You saw it? Yeah. They've been resharing it in the local Facebook groups. I'm seeing comments from people we've never even met. I'm not responding, I said. Good. People who matter know better. The rest just want blood. Instead of rage posting or even defending myself publicly, I opened a blank document. A single line at the top. Family disagreements should never be weaponized for entertainment. Beneath it, I wrote, "The video circulating is edited. Legal action is being considered. I appreciate the messages of support, and for those who prefer the version they saw, may your storytelling bring you peace, because it sure as hell didn't bring me shame." I hit post. A few people commented supportively, some asked follow-up questions, others stayed quiet. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was a realtor I had worked with before. "Octavia, I'm so sorry," she started, hesitant. "One of the families we were going to show your listing to, they pulled out." Because of a TikTok? They said they didn't want drama near the property. Their words, not mine. I thanked her and ended the call. So it had bled into real life. I wasn't just a meme. I was a cautionary tale now, but I didn't disappear. I adjusted. 2 days passed without much incident. I worked, watered my garden, wrote in my journal. Then a box arrived. No return address, no label. I opened it slowly, already knowing something about it would sting. Inside was a picture frame, expensive, heavy, lined with small floral carvings. Inside it was a photo from my wedding. Me, in white, my ex-husband beside me. And there, just behind us in the background, was Delphine. Laughing, looking directly into the camera. The glass had been shattered, deliberately. A jagged crack split right across my face. A small sticky note was attached to the bottom. "You'll never have what you pretend to be." I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just stared. Memory took over. That day, the toast. Delphine had stood, champagne glass raised, and said, "If anyone taught Octavia what love looks like, it was me." Laughter followed, but I remember the tightness in my chest, the way my smile had faltered just slightly. She never celebrated me. She measured herself against me. Every moment I had that looked like happiness was another tally on her list of personal injustices. I took the photo frame out to the backyard that evening. The soil was soft from recent rain. I dug a shallow hole near the base of the garden wall, placed the shattered photo inside, and covered it with earth. No words. No ritual. When Renee stopped by later, wine in hand, she didn't ask. Just poured us each a glass. "It's not about money," I told her. "It never was." Renee nodded, letting me fill the silence. "It's about erasing me," I continued. "So she gets to exist untouched, unquestioned." Renee swirled her wine. "You're touching back, just not with fire, with facts." We clinked glasses. The next morning, I went to a yoga class. My first in months. I wasn't there to stretch, I was there to breathe. During meditation, the instructor asked us to visualize something we were letting go of. I pictured Delphine, not as a person, but as a shape, a storm, swirling and repetitive, something that passed over again and again, but never changed form. And I said, inside my head, "You're a pattern, and I'm stepping out of you." That afternoon, I drafted a new version of my will. Not out of fear, but clarity. In it, I wrote, "If any member of my family challenges this, they forfeit any and all remaining claims to my estate." It wasn't bitterness, it was design. I placed the updated document in my fireproof safe, along with the original video clip, court records, screenshots of every lie, and even the broken pieces of the photo frame, now wrapped in fabric. I closed the safe and whispered, "The day I disappear is the day I choose, and today is not that day." That night, while making tea, I checked the comment section under the viral video. Something new. An anonymous account had commented just an hour earlier. "This clip was edited. I helped do it. I'm sorry. She doesn't deserve this." 5 minutes later, it was gone. But not before I got a screenshot, and not before I smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks. I remember how calm the morning felt. The kind of calm that doesn't just happen, it's earned. I had coffee in one hand, a notepad in the other, ready to review a few last documents for my attorney. Birds were chirping. The air was still. My home finally felt like a fortress I had rebuilt with paper, evidence, and unwavering boundaries. But peace has a scent. It smells like something's missing. And that morning, the air was too clean, too still. As I walked past the front window, something shifted. Not the weather, not a noise, just a flicker in the corner of my eye. I paused, turned slightly, and peeked through the side curtain. Delphine was standing on my porch. Again. Beside her was a man I recognized from an old Facebook post. Her boyfriend. Both looked disheveled, like they'd spent the night in a car. But their expressions were performative. Big eyes, slouched shoulders, carefully timed sighs. I didn't open the door. Instead, I pulled out my phone and tapped into my security camera app. I pressed record. That's when she pulled out her phone and went live. "My sister won't even open the door," Delphine said into the camera, her voice cracking for effect. "We've been sleeping in the car. We have nowhere else to go. But I guess success makes you forget who helped you get there." The boyfriend chimed in. "She's in there pretending we don't exist, after everything." My chest tightened, not because of what they said, but because I knew how fast a lie like that could spread. Within minutes, neighbors were peeking out behind blinds. Someone across the street started filming from their driveway. The live stream chat began flooding with reactions. "Unbelievable. She's just watching them suffer? Rich and cold. Figures." I sent the live stream link directly to my attorney and Sheila, the HOA president, without saying a word. 20 minutes later, they left. But the damage had already rippled far beyond the curb. By noon, edited clips of the live stream were circulating online. One with over 30,000 views had paired a slow-motion filter with sad piano music and a caption that read, "When family turns their back." That evening, I received a text from my business partner. "Just a heads up, this might start affecting some of our future client meetings. I'll do my best to manage expectations." I was nodding along when my phone buzzed again. Declined. My credit card had failed at the grocery store checkout. I got home and immediately checked my credit profile. There were new alerts, an unauthorized inquiry. An email address had been added to my account profile, one I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. They weren't just trying to smear me, they were trying to undo me. I called the fraud department, reported the breach, and initiated a formal credit freeze. Then I contacted all 3 bureaus and logged the timestamps. The next day, my home insurance provider left a voicemail. "Hi, Ms. Reinhardt, just confirming your request to add a secondary resident to the property policy." My stomach dropped. Delphine was trying to establish herself as a legal resident, possibly to lay the groundwork for a future claim or dispute, maybe even trying to argue for shared ownership. I didn't feel violated. I felt mobilized. I printed every email, every alert, every screenshot. I wrote a timeline by hand and sent it to myself in a certified envelope. Legal timestamp. My house didn't need more locks. It needed digital fencing. Later that week, Renee called. You home? Yeah. Why? There's a man taking pictures around your property. I just saw him step over our shared fence line. I rushed outside, catching the man mid-snap, camera in hand. Renee was already approaching him. Excuse me, she said firmly. Can I help you? He turned slightly. I'm just doing a survey, property reassessment. For who? Renee demanded. He mumbled something, reached into his coat, but never pulled out an ID. You can show it to the cops, she snapped. He fled before we could get his plate. That night, I filed a police report. I installed another security camera, this one facing the street. This isn't just defamation, I told Renee. It's invasion, and I'm done reacting. It's time to respond. I spent the evening finalizing affidavits, updating my attorney, and alerting my lender. The next morning, I made tea, sat at the kitchen island, and breathed deeply. I hadn't checked the mail in 2 days. I finally did. Among the usual flyers and bills was a letter from my bank. The envelope was thick, official. Inside, the notice read, "We are contacting you regarding a recent request to alter primary ownership of mortgage account, number XXX. The request was submitted via mail, with supporting documents including a signature from Octavia Reinhardt and a statement from an alleged joint homeowner. I stared at the page. There was no joint homeowner. And the signature wasn't mine. It was a poor attempt to mimic my cursive, slanted too sharply, with a capital R that curled the wrong way. They were trying to take my house. They weren't just playing games anymore. They were drawing up blueprints for a theft dressed in family clothing. I picked up the notice and slid it into a folder labeled Fraud Active. Then I opened a new file on my computer titled Retaliation Phase 2. Because reputation was never the real weapon, it was the distraction. Control was the weapon. And I had no intention of letting go of mine. The message came in just after noon. A simple, clean text from Dad. Come home. Your mother's in the hospital. It's serious. The words didn't grip me with fear. They slid across my skin like a cold wind, familiar but never welcomed. For 2 hours I paced, debated, checked every hospital website in Charleston without finding her name. Still, a sliver of guilt managed to wedge itself in. What if this time it was real? I drove to the house I hadn't stepped foot in for nearly 5 years. The street was unchanged. White siding, a porch swing that never swung, a yard with roses Dad still pruned to perfection. I rang the doorbell, heart knocking louder than my hand. Susan opened it. No IV, no wheelchair, no signs of illness, just a woman in a cashmere sweater and lip balm that cost more than most dinners. She blinked in mild surprise. Octavia, you came. I got a message saying you were hospitalized. She hesitated just long enough to expose the lie. I wasn't. Your father was just worried. I stepped inside, ignoring the way my shoes felt too loud on their polished hardwood floor. Dad was in the living room, seated in his usual armchair like he hadn't orchestrated the trap I'd just walked into. A cup of tea was already poured. For me, we're too old to keep living with this tension, he said, as though this was reconciliation and not a sting operation. I didn't sit. Why lie? Because we didn't think you'd come otherwise. And that didn't tell you everything you needed to know? He sighed. Your mother's exhausted, Delphine's unstable, and you're out there living like nothing ever happened. I bit my tongue. Let him talk. I've already pulled part of my retirement, he added. Put it against a loan. They needed leverage, so I gave them your name. I blinked. You used my name? It's not binding, he said quickly. It's symbolic. Just reassurance for the lender. If something went wrong, that you'd hand over the house I built with my own hands? You weren't going to lose anything. I stepped back like his words had teeth. You didn't just cross a line. You dug it deeper and told me to pretend it was a rope. They said nothing. I left before the tea got cold. Driving away, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just drove. I pulled into Renee's driveway without texting. She opened the door before I reached it. "You're pale," she said. "They used my name." "For what?" "To promise money that isn't theirs, using a hospital lie to get me in the room." She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew the answer. We stood in her backyard, looking at the fence that split our properties. "They never loved me enough to stop using me," I whispered. Renee handed me a glass of water. "They don't get to call it love if they only show up to take." For the first time in years, I cried. Not because of pain, because of release. My shoulders ached from holding up every unspoken expectation, every favor disguised as family. Later that evening, I deleted every family contact from my phone. I blocked numbers. I revoked shared access to every account, utility, and password. I stood in my kitchen and whispered to myself, I buried my anchor. Now I float by choice, not abandonment. The next morning, I called the hospital Dad had named. "Hi, I'm just confirming. Was Susan Hale admitted in the last 2 weeks?" A pause. Then, "We have no record of Susan Hale being treated here this month. Can I get that in writing?" The staff agreed. I emailed the confirmation to my attorney, who added it to the thickening file under a tab labeled Deception Timeline. There was no more heartbreak, only action. "If your lifeline turns into a leash," I told Renee later, "you learn to chew through rope." That evening, I checked my voicemail, more from habit than curiosity. A single message waited. My mother's voice. "You broke your father's heart today, but you can still fix it. We forgive you." No apology, no admission, just a quiet twist of the knife, placing blame in my lap like it belonged there. I pressed delete. I didn't speak. Then I whispered to myself, "Forgiveness isn't currency I owe anymore." I hadn't slept well. My dreams were stitched together with flashes of the past, hallways from my childhood home, the peeling wallpaper in the kitchen, the sound of a screen door slamming that always seemed too loud. I woke up tangled in my sheets, heart racing like I'd run somewhere far in my sleep and forgotten the way back. I stepped into the kitchen, eyes scanning the backyard through the sliding glass doors. A car was parked down the block, unmoving, engine off, windows dark. Not unfamiliar, but not friendly either. I stared at it long enough to feel the unease start to bloom, then turned back inside and did what I always did when my nerves got noisy. I checked my locks, every door, every window, then the cameras, motion sensors, alerts, all green. But my body didn't believe the system. Then my phone buzzed. "Someone is live near your location." The app recognized the stream automatically. It was Delphine. I opened the feed, and there she was. Pale, tear-streaked, breathing heavily into the front camera. She stood on the sidewalk near my house, hair damp, mascara running, eyes wild. "If something happens to me today," she whispered, "just know it's because she wouldn't listen." Her voice cracked. The comments started rolling in. "She looks terrified. Why isn't her sister doing anything? Someone go check on her." I shook my head. She was staging another breakdown. But this one wasn't meant for me. It was for the algorithm. Not this time. I closed the app. But she didn't stop. The video continued, now showing my home in the background. "I'm not safe," Delphine said. "And she knows that. But she doesn't care." The comments turned sharper, more pointed. "Get help! Why won't she come outside? Someone call the police." The phone rang. "Renee, don't go out there," she said, voice low and urgent. "She wants you in the frame. Don't give it to her." "I'm calling the cops." "Good. Let them deal with her circus." I sent the livestream link to the police, logged the time, and stepped back from the window. My hands were steady, but my pulse was a stampede. This wasn't confrontation, it was theater. And she had rehearsed. Then, the world split open. The crack of a gunshot shattered the silence. A single, loud, ugly sound that sent my body flat to the floor before my brain caught up. Alarms blared. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Camera alerts, police confirmation, security notifications, Renee texting in all caps. I crawled toward the corner of the room, then stood, heart pounding, and opened the live camera feed. There it was, a bullet hole, clean through the upper corner of my roof. Debris scattered in the attic. No injuries, no fire, just the violent punctuation of a warning shot. I called 911 again. This is Octavia Reinhardt. A firearm was discharged at my residence. I have footage, timestamps, and a confirmed identity. No one is hurt. I did not retaliate. The operator stayed on the line. Officers were already en route. I rewound the camera feed, frame by frame. There she was, Delphine, gun in hand, raised, fired, not aimed at me, aimed at my house. She didn't want to hurt me, I said out loud. She wanted to brand me, scar the one thing I built without her. 15 minutes later, flashing lights painted my neighborhood red and blue. Delphine was on the ground, face in the grass, handcuffed before she could say another word into her camera. Her boyfriend stood nearby, hands in the air, shouting, "I didn't know! I thought it was just for show!" I stood on my porch and handed the officer a folder. Here's the footage, and everything that led up to it. Inside were screenshots, previous threats, written statements, and a copy of her livestream. HOA President Sheila stepped onto the porch behind me. "We've had disturbances before," she told the officers, "but never like this. She's been warned." Several times. The officers nodded. One of them turned to me. "You did everything right. Calm, documented, non-reactive. I wish everyone handled situations this way." I didn't respond. I just nodded once, softly. Because inside, I wasn't celebrating. I was steady. I wasn't the storm. I was the shelter she couldn't breach. But the storm didn't end with the arrest. No, it shifted platforms. By the next morning, clips of the shooting and the takedown were everywhere. Someone had even posted a close-up of the bullet hole in my roof. Headlines danced between "Woman arrested for mental breakdown" and "Sister's cold silence leads to collapse." Comments raged on both sides. She pushed her sister too far. Why didn't anyone help her before it got to this? Octavia did what any of us would have done. Then came the analysis videos. One creator, a therapist, broke down Delphine's live streams. "This is classic narcissistic martyrdom," she said. Notice how every "I'm scared" is immediately followed by a subtle blame. It's never about her choices. It's always someone else failing her. That video hit 1 million views in 2 days. The tide was turning. But I didn't post. I didn't explain. I sipped tea on my porch, watching workers patch the roof. "Truth doesn't trend first," I muttered, "but it survives longer." 2 nights later, after the dust had somewhat settled, I was sweeping the porch when I saw it. A plain envelope, no return address, slipped halfway into my mailbox. I pulled it out slowly. The handwriting was hers, sharp, rushed, unmistakable. Inside was one line. "You forced me to become this." No greeting, no signature, just blame, once again wrapped like a gift. I folded the letter and slipped it into my safe. Not to keep, but to remember. Because some people blame you for the fire while holding the match. I had never felt so precise in my life. Every folder on my desktop was named, dated, cross-referenced. My living room looked like a war room. Stacks of printed emails, digital screenshots, notarized statements, copies of HOA complaints, live stream transcriptions. Everything Delphine had done, every attempt to rewrite my life as her victimhood monologue, I had preserved it all. Not for vengeance, for clarity. I labeled the folders: threats, fabrications, live streams, attempts to defraud, and my favorite, Delphine mythology. Because that's what she had turned herself into. A folktale soaked in self-pity, sharpened by public sympathy. I made 3 printed sets of the entire packet. One I stored in a locked drawer. One I handed to my attorney that morning. The last one I placed in a fireproof safe next to my will. With it, I included a handwritten note. They wanted chaos. I built clarity. Later that day, my attorney texted me, "You just built a bulletproof narrative. And they won't see it coming." I started drafting a formal statement to be submitted to the district attorney's office. A request for civil harassment protection and a legal freeze on property manipulation. Each sentence was measured. This wasn't just self-defense. This was architecture. I wasn't recovering, I was building. For the first time in weeks, I sat back in my chair and didn't feel hunted. I didn't just survive, I said aloud. I documented the fire. That same afternoon, my phone rang. It was a partner from the real estate firm I'd worked with last fall, the one that quietly stopped replying after Delphine's fake rooftop crisis blew up online. Octavia, she said, I owe you an apology. Our board reacted too quickly, and I pushed back too late. I said nothing, letting her words do the heavy lifting. We've since seen the evidence, the police report. The retraction article helped, but the footage you filed through the DA, we know the truth now. There's no expiration date on decency, I said simply. She laughed, awkwardly. We'd still love to list that second property if you're open. I'll think about it, I replied, and hung up. Later that night, a local blog published a retraction. What really happened behind the viral roof shot. It detailed the incident, citing court documents, police statements, and public filings, all backed by my evidence. For the first time, my name wasn't next to words like sister feud or cold-hearted. It was next to meticulous, strategic, and measured. I walked through my neighborhood the next morning, and people didn't avoid eye contact. No one looked away. A few nodded. One woman even smiled. I didn't need applause. I just needed air. But even inside calm, betrayal finds a way to breathe. That evening, I returned home to find Luke, my partner, sitting on the edge of our couch, holding his phone. He looked up with a conflicted expression I hadn't seen before. You all right? I asked, placing my keys on the entryway table. He hesitated, then, Are you sure you're not provoking her? I stared. I mean, he continued quickly, it's just, this is all so extreme. Maybe if you'd engage differently. I cut him off. You're asking if I earned being hunted. That's what you're really asking. Octavia, that's not what I meant. But it's what you implied. We stood in silence. Something fragile cracked between us. I've been fighting to protect everything. This house, my name, my mind. And now I'm defending myself inside my own living room? I'm sorry, he whispered. It's just overwhelming. I nodded once. Not because I forgave him, but because I understood. Love without trust, I said, is just surveillance with romance. He didn't reply. And I didn't need him to. The next morning, I received an unexpected email. The sender was familiar, but only faintly. A coworker from years ago, someone I hadn't spoken to since a shared project we both walked away from frustrated and exhausted. Hey, the message began. This might be strange, but I thought you should know. Delphine reached out to me last week, under a fake name. My hand stilled over the keyboard. She asked about our project from back then. Wanted me to say you stole credit for my part. Said she was compiling testimonials for a podcast. The email continued. I didn't bite. But she's trying to build something nasty. You should know. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. She's losing control. I closed the laptop and sat still. That sentence became a whisper in my head. She's losing control. 2 days later, I walked into the Charleston County Courthouse. My attorney walked beside me, holding the red evidence file like it was sacred scripture. The court clerk led us to the filing window, where we submitted the formal request for a civil harassment injunction and a property protection order. The judge, an older woman with kind but exhausted eyes, reviewed my folder. She flipped through it silently, pausing only to glance at the video transcripts, the notarized screenshots, and the false mortgage attempt documentation. You've done more preparation than most lawyers I know, she said. I nodded. This is what boundaries look like when written in ink. Later that afternoon, as I sat alone in my car outside the courthouse, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Some people write apologies, I said. I write affidavits. I smiled. Not big, but real. That night, I made dinner. Something simple, roasted vegetables, grilled salmon, lemon tea. I felt calm. Until my phone rang. It was my attorney. There's a new development, he said, his voice calm but tighter than usual. And you're not going to like it. I sat down slowly. She's changed her story, he said. She's now claiming someone else fired the shot. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't even flinch. And who's the mystery marksman? I asked dryly. There was a pause. She named you. I laughed once. Dry. Flat. So now I shot at myself. It's not just a lie, he said. It's strategy. The courthouse lobby was cool, sterile. My heels clicked too loudly against the tile, and for a brief second, I hated the silence. But I clung to it, because silence meant control, and I wasn't about to lose that now. My attorney walked beside me, carrying the thick red folder we had spent weeks compiling. Evidence. Truth. Boundaries written into paper. I wore navy. A blazer that fit sharp at the shoulders and refused to sag anywhere. No makeup beyond lip balm. I wasn't there to charm. I was there to be taken seriously. As we rode the elevator, my attorney glanced at me. Delphine might not show up as the sister you knew. She'll show up as a performance. I nodded. Let her. Outside the courtroom, Renee squeezed my hand. Let them see your backbone, she whispered, not your bruises. I walked inside and immediately saw the audience. Half the courtroom was filled with strangers, local bloggers, curious neighbors. People who had heard about the roof lady or followed the TikTok drama like it was some kind of courtroom soap opera. Delphine sat to the right, next to a clean-cut lawyer in a slate-gray suit. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were down, hands folded, but it was all too polished. She'd rehearsed that pose in front of a mirror. The judge entered, and the bailiff called for silence. We began. Delphine's lawyer opened strong. He spoke of emotional strain, public embarrassment, and what he called Octavia's campaign of digital humiliation. He said I'd painted Delphine as a monster for internet clout. That the shooting incident was a psychological spiral triggered by relentless familial pressure. I didn't flinch. Because when the other side builds their castle out of sand, you wait for the tide. My attorney rose. He didn't pace or raise his voice. He simply unfolded the folder and placed the first page on the judge's bench. This is a copy of the police report from the shooting. Page after page followed. Screenshots, transcripts, voice memos, property filings, emails with forged signatures, fraud alerts, HOA complaints, the false hospital claim. Then came the twist. He called a witness, not one we'd listed previously. The room shifted. A young woman entered, maybe 20, nervous but upright. She introduced herself and took the stand. I was one of Ms. Carver's students, she said, voice shaking, when I was 16. Delphine's posture changed, slightly. Her fingers dug into the side of her seat. She offered us extra credit to sell products for a school fundraiser. We were told the money was for new classroom supplies, but later we found out, some of us, that it went to her personal PayPal account. Gasps echoed around the room. The judge held up a hand. Do you have documentation? The girl nodded. Emails, screenshots, a transaction history from that time. The judge took it, flipping through slowly. Delphine's lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Her face tightened. Her eyes flicked to me. For the first time all morning, I met her gaze and didn't blink. She broke 15 minutes later, whispered sharply to her lawyer. He requested a recess. In the hallway, she caught me. You planned this whole thing to destroy me, she hissed, voice low but venomous. No, I replied. You handed me the puzzle. I just assembled it. We returned to the courtroom. The judge looked directly at Delphine. This court finds Ms. Reinhardt's documentation credible and her request for legal protection warranted. She signed the order. Restraining order granted, property protections enforced, and, perhaps most satisfying of all, an official investigation into Delphine's teaching history initiated on the spot. As I walked out, there was no cheering, just the clicking of keyboards. That evening, a local news station ran the headline, Roof shooting case reveals deeper pattern of deception. I didn't watch the segment. Online forums lit up again. But this time, the current shifted. She didn't just protect herself, she did what no one else had the courage to do. I used to think she was cold, now I think she's brilliant. Someone posted side-by-side videos, one of Delphine's live stream, the other of the courtroom testimony. The comments favored facts. I didn't engage. My lawyer emailed me a photo from the courtroom. Me, standing straight, blazer crisp, face unreadable. I deleted it. Because validation feels different when you don't need it anymore. That night, as I folded laundry, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unfamiliar number. The voice, though, I knew instantly. Alice, your mom's cousin. I saw the news. I've been waiting for someone to stand up to that family. I have something you might want to see. I paused. Justice didn't always come in a gavel slam or a headline. Sometimes it waited in the shadows of people too scared to speak until someone else made the first crack. I leaned back on the couch, stared at the ceiling. Sometimes truth doesn't whisper, it waits. The envelope from Alice arrived with no return address, just my name in shaky cursive. I opened it on the kitchen counter, careful not to tear the corners. Inside was a photocopy of a letter dated over a decade ago. My mother's handwriting, instantly recognizable. The signature at the bottom confirmed it. The letter was addressed to Alice. In it, Susan spoke candidly about Delphine's behavior, how manipulative she could be, how many times she'd crossed lines, hurt people. But the line that made my jaw tighten was this: Delphine has a fragile spirit. Octavia is the one who can take it. There was no remorse, no hint of shame, just justification. If Delphine ever breaks, it's because we didn't protect her. But at least Octavia is still standing. That sentence didn't hurt. Not anymore. It clarified. They hadn't protected me. They'd positioned me as the net, the wall, the buffer, a daughter built to absorb. And I had, until I didn't. Some people aren't blind. They're just looking the other way. 3 days later, I met with my attorney for the final paperwork. We sat in his office, clean and quiet, as he reviewed the last stack of documents. Your estate is protected. Property cannot be contested or accessed by family unless pre-approved by the court. The clause regarding legal challengers forfeiting benefits, locked in. I nodded. Do you want to add a final witness for the signature? No, I said. It's mine alone. He passed the pen across the table. I signed with steady hands. No hesitation, no tremble. Not all closures require confrontation. Some require a signature and a locked drawer. When I left the office, the sun was warm and steady. I didn't rush home. I took a detour. The botanical garden hadn't changed. Same winding paths, same rustling leaves, same benches tucked under shade like secrets. I walked until I found the tree. I had helped plant it years ago with a volunteer group. Delphine had rolled her eyes back then, calling it hippie therapy. She laughed while I dug, while I got dirt under my fingernails. But I remembered what it felt like. To put something living into the ground and hope it stayed rooted. I sat nearby and pulled out my journal. I don't forgive them, I wrote. I just stopped needing them to understand me. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pressed flower I had tucked between pages months ago. I slid it into the book, closed the cover, and buried it beneath the base of the tree. Everything she mocked was something I grew from. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. Later that evening, I got a message from Delphine's now ex-boyfriend. Short, to the point. She's leaving town. Thought you should know. Said you won. Whatever that means. I didn't reply. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't forward it. I just read it, then deleted it, and blocked the number. Winning isn't about watching someone walk away. It's about not needing to chase them. The next morning, a contractor came by to fix the roof, finally sealing the last scar Delphine had left behind, the bullet hole. A reminder of the day love turned into ammunition. He worked quickly, professionally. Thinking of doing anything with the attic now that it's dry? He asked. Maybe a writing space, I said. He smiled. Nice. Always better when the top's solid. I nodded. After he left, I climbed up with my laptop and a thermos of tea. I opened a new document and typed the title, How to Outlive the Family You Were Born Into. The cursor blinked, waiting. Some houses aren't haunted by ghosts, they're haunted by expectations, and I just evicted mine. For the first time since Delphine showed up with her mess and her stories, I felt safe in my house again. Like the walls finally belonged to me. Like every step didn't echo with someone else's regret. That night, I got another envelope. No return address. Inside was a printed invitation. Rebuilding Boundaries, Women Who Chose Themselves. Panel discussion guest speaker, Octavia Reinhardt. Nominated anonymously. I stared at the paper, and I smiled. Maybe telling the truth wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was where I start teaching others how to tell theirs. The old courthouse had been restored into a bright, vaulted event hall with marble floors and clean oak trim. It used to echo with verdicts, now it held stories. Today, mine was one of them. A banner outside read, Rebuilding Boundaries, Women Who Chose Themselves. I hesitated on the steps, clutching my notes in one hand and smoothing my blazer with the other. Navy again, the color of steadiness. The crowd filtering into the building didn't look like strangers. They looked like survivors, women walking through their own versions of fire. And when I stepped onto the stage, they looked at me like someone who'd made it to the other side. I leaned into the microphone, breathing deep. They say the truth sets you free, I began. They're wrong. The truth costs you everything first. The room went still. I lost friends. My career slowed. I lost a home that had been mine in name, but never in peace. I lost a sister, though to be honest, I think I lost her long before this story ever made headlines. I kept going, not from memory, but from the marrow of my own spine. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for understanding. I told the truth. I wasn't made stronger by surviving them. I was made whole by choosing to live without them. The applause was warm, not loud. It didn't have to be. The resonance wasn't in the noise, it was in the stillness after. The next morning I received a new envelope, a cease and desist letter from Delphine's new lawyer, accusing me of defamation from the panel, demanding a retraction, and $25,000. I read it once, folded it in half, wrote one word across the top in red ink, void. I scanned it, attached it in an email to my attorney with a single sentence. Same dance, same shoes. I'm not dancing anymore. He responded within the hour. Already drafting the countersuit. Let's drain her of what she has left, legally. And so we did. We filed a defamation counterclaim, one that included the false accusation of firearm discharge, the documented harassment, and her malicious public attacks. It wasn't petty. It wasn't vengeance. It was a receipt. One with timestamps, security footage, witness statements, court filings, an affidavit from the arresting officer. And yes, the cease and desist, her latest attempt to play offense while standing in the wrong. The court accepted the case, hearing scheduled in 30 days. My thought, if she wanted to make me infamous, I'd make her accountable. In the meantime, the internet shifted again. Platforms started removing the viral videos tied to the roof incident. The algorithm, once an accomplice, had become a quiet vacuum, deleting what no longer served it. People who had stayed silent, former colleagues, neighbors, even old classmates, began speaking out. I knew something was off. I wish I'd said something sooner. A retired teacher from Delphine's former school wrote an op-ed. Delphine didn't break overnight. She was always built that way. Headlines emerged. Roof victim countersues in defining moment for online harassment law. I stayed off social media, but one message found me anyway. You gave me the courage to leave too. Thank you. That one I printed, folded, kept. 30 days later, the hearing came. Delphine didn't. Her attorney asked for a settlement. I agreed with one condition, a signed public retraction, and a permanent no-contact order. The judge approved everything. I received full restitution and coverage for legal fees. Delphine's accounts were restricted by court order. Her reputation, what little remained, collapsed under the weight of facts. Outside the courtroom, I stepped into the sun, pulled off my blazer, and exhaled. Some stories don't end with applause. Some end with the other side finally going silent. Months passed. The attic was finally finished, polished floors, bookshelves, a deep armchair in the corner beside the window. I called it my studio, but it was really a sanctuary. I started writing a book, title already typed in bold, Fences and Fireproofing, a memoir of chosen survival. My garden bloomed below. Tulips, basil, a stubborn lavender bush. Renee insisted would never take. It did. Renee still visited twice a week. She brought pie. I brewed tea. We rarely talked about the past anymore. One morning, I opened a drawer and pulled out the last letter I'd received from Delphine, the one she left after the shooting. You forced me to become this. I didn't burn it. I didn't tear it up. I slid it between the pages of my manuscript, right after chapter 1, not as an answer, as a warning. My story was never about being hurt. It was about never letting that hurt write the final word. That word was mine.